I'm Morgan McGarry.
I'm Caitlin Jasper.
I'm Philip Scott.
I'm Jack Barron, and our topic is capitalism versus socialism, and we're open for questions.
First and most obvious question, what's capitalism? What's socialism?
Well, we all decided to do one definition. We decided to agree upon one definition for both of those.
Okay.
And the first, for capitalism, is an economic system where means of making a living are owned by private individuals.
Okay.
And then socialism is an economic system where the means of making a living are owned by the state or the public.
How would you distinguish between socialism and communism?
I'll take this one. So socialism is where the means of production are organized, distributed, and labored upon primarily by the workers. So they're the ones who get to decide how the means of production are distributed, what products are distributed, how they do that. Communism is you finally got to that point where X number of countries are socialist, so they're able to support each other in a cohesive manner. And so then largely automation would take over, and so then the means of production are distributed and owned by the populaces, not just the workers.
We hear the term democratic socialism. What does that mean?
We also agreed on a definition for this. It's a socialist system of government achieved by democratic means.
All right, I'll
Good.
coming up. So we, all the politics we see. Not going to ask you what your political persuasion is, but like we hear a lot about socialism, Medicare for all, free college for all. What do you think about that? And if you agree with it, who's going to pay for it?
Us individually, or
Well, however you want to answer. I mean, I guess, do you consider that socialism? What do you consider that? We're come one, come all, give, whatever you want, the government's going to give you.
So I think I sort of understand what you're saying. Personally, I would identify more as a social democrat, which means basically social justice is met. So like economic differences would be met, food would be provided by government, things like that, government housing. But it's within a capitalist economy. I think taxes could cover that personally. You're going to have less expenses if they're not paying for certain things already out of pocket. So I really feel like the difference would be made up there, just personally.
both of us are kind of on the same page. I leaned more towards socialism in a capitalism versus socialism kind of environment, but I also believe that taxes would be the way to achieve kind of like Medicare and
So I am a socialist, and I am for, obviously, Medicare for all and tuition-free public college. To describe how we would pay for those, I'm just going to go straight off of Bernie Sanders' bills, which he's proposed. So for tuition-free public secondary school, he proposes that we fund this entirely through a Robin Hood tax on Wall Street. So this would be a 0.5% tax on stock trades, 0.1% on bonds, and 0.005% on derivatives. And then for Medicare for all, we would do that through income tax. A higher income tax would, the goal is to offset what you are paying for your premiums and deductibles.
The Robin Hood tax, that means you're robbing from the rich and giving to the poor? Isn't that Robin Hood?
That's what its opponents have called us.
Pretty sure that was the mantra of Robin Hood, wasn't it? Rob from the rich and give to the poor? Just double check it. Jack, where do you fall on it?
I am in support of capitalism, and the way that would be done obviously would be through taxes. Now, I don't think it could be done through like capitalism, and I wouldn't want it to be just because it'd be a lot of money just out of nowhere. Like, well, I mean, it'd be from the rich, but personally, I feel like the rich are rich because they obtain that money themselves usually, so they usually deserve that money. And I don't think it should be stripped.
I think, Kaylin, I think you said this. You said that it's democratic socialism was supported by a capitalist economy. Is that right?
Social democracy, yes.
Social democracy. Is socialism supported by a capitalist economy? Is that? Boil it
Not
down?
quite.
No, it's more a socialist system of government
Okay.
that is put in by democratic means.
That's a
That's-
democratic socialism.
That's democratic.
Social democracy is more about social justice between people. It's not necessarily about.
So social democracy, the means of production are still owned by private individuals, but you have heavier taxes. So social democracy is many countries in Europe, Australia, Canada, New Zealand.
Okay.
They pay for socialistic programs through higher marginal tax rates. But overall, their economy, because they have individual free markets, that is still a capitalist economy.
How's that beneficial to those producing wealth? Or is it beneficial to those in that capitalistic economy?
Well, it's
If I have to operate in a country where the government's going to take more of my money to support their social function, why don't I just go operate in a country that doesn't do that, where I can keep all of my profits?
well, it's typically because people have a higher standard of living
Okay.
in these social democracies. The top 10 countries are ranked most happy for last year. All 10 are social democracies
Okay.
in Europe, and Canada, and New Zealand.
So they've attained a level of economic wealth that allows them to participate in these social functions.
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that them obtaining that level may have been built on capitalism, not on socialism?
I think that's a very fair.
So capitalism has enabled them to become socialists.
Yeah, I view capitalism as an escape from feudalistic society to one day be able to reach socialism.
So capitalism is a means to an end.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So what would you view as the leading drawbacks of capitalism?
I have this one. The drawbacks of capitalism. It's a lot focused on profit, and there's it has kind of like a neglect of social benefits for those who are less fortunate, and it has an emphasis on consumption and the wealth inequality. Like it doesn't necessarily address those who are less fortunate and who can't become, because in a capitalist would say that poor people are poor because they aren't doing anything or because they aren't working as hard as they need to. But a lot of times that's untrue, because there are such things as working poor where they're making minimum wage or they're making less than minimum wage and they can't support them and their family. Does that make sense?
It does, but contrawise, couldn't you say that the people who are wealthy very often are that because they're skilled and they're talented and they work hard, and is that a negative?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily negative, but a lot of wealth is inherited. I think.
I'm just curious. I didn't know if that was a factor. That was just,
Where'd you get that from?
So I can say what I think about this matter, the biggest problems with capitalism. So I think it is an inefficient system in regards to food and housing, and I think it is profit-driven in healthcare. It is a large contributor to global warming, and the main problem with it is the wealth inequality that it creates.
it's a contributor to global warming. Is China a capitalistic society or socialist?
They are capitalistic.
They are?
Yes.
I would say they would be a main contributor to global warming.
I-
So their
I would
capitalist
agree with
society
that.
drives that?
I would agree with
Here's the second.
You mentioned that they're profit-driven when it comes to healthcare.
that. Yes.
If they're not profit-driven when it comes to healthcare, then how do they pay for research and development and those kinds of things that then create the drugs and the medicines that are used in healthcare? So wouldn't you say that without profits driving the goals of research and those kinds of things, that many of the medicines that we have discovered or developed over time would not have been created?
Yeah, so that's the drug companies that are developing these drugs. When I talk about for-profit in the healthcare industry, I'm mostly talking about insurance.
Why do the drug companies develop these drugs? What's their motivation for developing a drug?
Profit and curing people who need these drugs.
Okay.
Just-
Are you, and I know this is off topic, so just go with me for a minute. Are you familiar with the patent regulations for drug development? So if I create a new drug, a new insulin drug, a new cancer prevention drug, whatever, I have a patent on that drug for a set number of years before it can become a generic. Because you can go to the pharmacy and they're like, do you want the name brand or do you want the generic? I have a patent for a set number of years, I think it's like 5 years or something, where I have a patent for that. Why is it important that I, as a drug manufacturer, have a patent for that drug for the first however many years, we'll say 5 years, before somebody else can go make a knockoff of it?
So that you can make profit off of it?
So I can make profit off of it. Why is it important that I make profit off of it?
Because if other people know your recipe to do it, then you're not making the profit you deserve.
Okay, and well, it's not about deserving. If I'm not making a profit, I can't what? I can't stay in business, I can't pay my employees, I can't keep the lights on, I can't be motivated to continue to develop those things.
Let me ask real quick, because you mentioned a couple of times the gap in rich and poor and that sort of thing. And you mentioned higher taxes. Who would be taxed more? Because if poor people are still paying higher taxes, is that also?
I'm more for a progressive tax system in which you tax more to those who makes more.
Okay.
So, because we can all agree there is a set amount. That amount might vary where you live, but you can sustain life on a very comfortably if you're a single person making $100,000 a year. Say, would you agree? Most places you can, if you're in the U.S., you can sustain life making $100,000 a year.
Okay.
But there are people who make 10 times that a minute, and I just don't see the purpose of that.
What would you say to someone who would respond that under the current system right now, people in the highest 10% tax bracket pay 27 times their share?
Well, 10% of a $10,000 tax is, if we're talking about the current system, I would say that the current tax, a certain percentage of what you're taxed, is going to take more out of someone who makes less income. So if you make $20,000 a year, losing, I don't know, let's say $2,000, $3,000 is going to impact you more than someone who makes $150,000 a year losing $15,000, $20,000.
Right, but I'm saying the highest brackets, say the highest 1%, they pay 27 times the average tax of someone who makes 20,000 or 35, 50,000, percentage-wise. They make 27 times that. So aren't they already paying the amount of 27 other people, even though they're in a higher tax bracket? Because they're in a higher tax bracket.
I see that as their moral obligation as a member of society. Because to make all that profit, there are people in this community buying their product. And so then what these higher progressive tax will do is it's putting some of that money back into the community to enrich the whole community.
So
What about-
taxing them more is better.
I'm not the income tax isn't my favorite. I wouldn't get rid of an income tax, but my favorite taxes are Wall Street taxes and corporate taxes and value-added taxes.
So would you give a tax break then to those who are in that upper level paying more already, who also give to the community in other ways besides taxes?
If I was able to enact,
But aren't they
value-added
already
taxes,
fulfilling their moral obligation by giving back in ways that they choose rather than giving it to giving in taxes?
the richest people, they have their own organizations for charity, and when they put their money in the charities, it's going into their own charities, which I'm not saying the charities don't give money, that would not be a fair statement at all. They're doing their part. But with that said, a lot of this charitable money isn't being used for charities. It's like a tax haven almost. So
Don't you see how this is making you the moral evaluator of what they should do with their money? You're taking away that freedom.
That's one of the problems I have with it is because I don't think if I'm rich, I don't think I should be morally obligated to give money to the poor. Now, I mean, I would, but I don't think that should come with being rich. I feel like I should have an option, and that that's why taxes are implemented and there's higher taxes, because if you're making more, I feel like you should definitely tax more. But I don't think it's ever a moral obligation, or it should be.
Okay, I know you're talking about democratic socialism, and probably I'm coming from the perspective of classic socialism, but rhetorically speaking, would you agree that God gave each of us gifts and talents and we're expected to use them? Okay, under classic socialism, what would be my motivation to succeed and excel in the gift God has given me if, you see where I'm going?
So your motivation would be growing closer to an equal society, that all people receive the same quality of life, and that one group is not oppressing another.
Like, are you saying your motivations to pursue like gifts and create like things like that? Are you saying like
To
creative
excel,
or
to be
like,
better,
just-
and be rewarded for being better? I mean, isn't that taking that away?
Okay, well, I'm not a democratic socialist, I'm a social democrat, so
Okay.
that's still there. Social democrat is still capitalism. It
Alright.
is still capitalism. So there is, in my worldview, I personally don't see any hindrance from improvement. I mean, providing basic needs for people through social programs, I don't feel like hinders anyone from going out and pursuing what they're passionate about or what they're, I don't feel like there's any hindrance.
Philip, would you agree?
Well, what was the question?
Do you think striving to excel and being rewarded for being better at something than maybe somebody else, that is taken away under classic socialism? Because there's no, what's my motivation? What's my initiative?
No, I don't think that exists. I think there still is a drive, and that's seen mostly through schooling. The people who receive the best grades in socialist countries, they're the ones who they're going to get to go to grad school. That's how it works. Everybody gets a higher education, but those who are going to grad school, it's dependent upon how hard you work in your college experience.
Why would I want to do that?
What's the motivation?
To go to grad school.
Well,
If I was receiving the same sort of money as anything else.
yeah, so I'll use the example of a doctor. So Cuba is the third highest per capita per 10,000 people doctor to citizen ratio. So a doctor in Cuba, they make 6 times the average national wage. And it is also seen as a great honor in Cuban society to be a doctor. It and being representative democracy government, those are the 2 highest professions in that society. So there still is a drive to succeed and really better yourself and the rest of your community. It's a much more communal thought. I will concede it's a more communal thought than individual.
So do you want to be, I don't know what the word is, okay, do you want to go to a doctor because they graduated grad school over the next person, or because they're the best at what they do and they can treat you the best as far as curing your illness, treating your ailment, whatever the case may be? Do you want to go see them just because they got a graduate degree? Because trust me, I have a graduate degree. I know a lot of other people have graduate degrees. Some of them are really good in their field. Some of them just stuck it out long enough to get a graduate degree. Do you want to go to that person just because they got that graduate degree, or because they're the best at what they do and the market has bared out that they provide the best service, provide the best medical advice?
Because they're the best.
That's what I believe too.
So if I am very successful, if I work my way up, I made a lot of money in the corporation, and as a result of that, I hired thousands of people, and I gave them employment that they might not otherwise have. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think in a capitalist framework, it's a good thing.
But not in a socialist framework.
No, I'm.
Why not?
I'm also not a proponent of planned economies. I believe in fully democratized business.
But if I'm providing work for people who otherwise would not have work, why is that a bad thing? In other words, it's a choice for people to come to work for me. But, otherwise, they may not have a job.
Yeah, so what I would say to that comes mostly from Marx's labor theory of value, and I think for small businesses that is perfectly fine. Small entrepreneurship, building yourself up from the ground. But I think it gets to a point that the surplus value that the worker is creating by